Attitude? Karen's voice, sharp enough to shatter glass, ricocheted through first class. My pulse kicked up. A kid, maybe 10, small for his age, just sitting there. Then, smack. Didn't even see it coming. He didn't cry, didn't flinch, just touched his wrist. A watch. Noticed it then. Sleek, expensive, trouble. Word is, Whitman doesn't play fair. Flight attendants are replaceable, see? But this kid, he's got something Karen doesn't. Power. This airline doesn't know it yet, but her brand of cruelty just messed with the wrong, quiet, watchful boy. They have no idea how his quiet kindness will change everything. And I'm the only one who knows why. In one explosive second, her palm struck, passengers gasped, and the aircraft froze mid-roll. Nobody knew who the boy was. But the moment he touched his watch, everything changed. Cameras turned on, whispers spread, and the flight that was supposed to take off would never be the same. The slap echoed like a gunshot across the sleek silence of VeraJet's first-class cabin. For a split second, everything froze. The whir of the engines, the click of seatbelts, even the hum of conversations. Caleb Whitman, 10 years old, sat stunned in seat 2A, one cheek blazing red, eyes wide with disbelief. His small red backpack lay forgotten by his feet. He hadn't yelled, hadn't talked back, hadn't even raised his voice. But the slap came anyway. Karen Lulton, the lead flight attendant, stood over him with her palm still hovering midair, as if she herself couldn't believe what she'd just done. Her lips were tight, her eyes burning with something that wasn't just anger. It was indignation. I said, "No more attitude," she snapped. "This is first class, young man. If you can't behave, you don't belong here." The cabin remained quiet. Too quiet. A woman in row 3, silver hair tied in a bun, phone clutched in shaking hands, whispered, "Oh my God," as she lifted her device and began recording. Caleb didn't move. He didn't cry. Not yet. His hands, small and folded neatly in his lap, twitched. His eyes, wet now, locked on the floor. It wasn't the pain that stunned him. It was the disbelief that someone had hit him on a plane in front of strangers because she didn't believe he belonged. "Miss." A man's voice finally broke the silence. A business traveler in 2C, middle-aged, suit jacket still unbuttoned. "Did you just hit that boy?" Karen turned sharply, her authority in full force. "Sir, this passenger was being disruptive and rude. I warned him multiple times to show respect." Caleb blinked, the moisture in his eyes no longer contained. A single tear escaped down his cheek. He turned toward the window, pressing his lips together. But he didn't say anything. The woman across the aisle said, voice shaking, "I've been watching. He's been quiet the whole time." Karen's tone sharpened. "This is a matter of flight protocol." He was challenging my instructions. "What instructions?" someone whispered. A baby cried faintly in economy. Tension cracked the cabin like a growing thunderstorm. Caleb finally moved. His small hand reached down to the watch on his wrist. It was sleek, dark, and glimmered faintly under the overhead light. He pressed 2 fingers against the glass face and held them there for exactly 4 seconds. In the cockpit, the co-pilot's console pinged. A silent alert flashed red for 3 seconds, then vanished. Simultaneously, the cabin speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came through tight and clipped. "We've received an alert. We're being instructed to hold position. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." The plane, which had just begun to taxi toward the runway, slowed, then stopped completely. Passengers shifted. A sense of something bigger rippled through them, like a current running just beneath their feet. Karen turned back to Caleb, her face paling slightly. What did you just do?" Caleb didn't answer. His voice was still somewhere deep inside him, tangled in disbelief, wrapped in humiliation. But his fingers dropped from the watch and he looked straight at her. "I want to speak to my mom," he said quietly. Karen blinked, uncertain. "You don't get to make demands. She'll want to know you hit me." Those words, so simple, so soft, hit the cabin harder than the slap. The older woman with the phone whispered, "He's calling his mom." She stared at the screen. "This is going to go viral." A young man 2 rows back said, "Someone needs to stop her. This is abuse." Karen looked around the cabin, realizing that the tide had turned. The air no longer obeyed her. She was losing control, not just of the narrative, but of the space itself. Young man, you've disrupted this flight. You may have triggered a delay, and I will not let you. You slapped a child, a passenger interrupted louder now. I'm filing a complaint, someone else said. Karen's face twisted with panic, but she tried to maintain authority. The airline has procedures. He was non-compliant. He's 10, a woman near the front shouted. What could he have done? The first-class cabin was no longer still. Murmurs had risen into voices. Phones were raised. Faces were flushed with outrage. Caleb sat quietly in the middle of it all. A single tear still fresh on his cheek, his eyes now dry, but wounded. The intercom chimed again. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard situation, ground control has requested we remain at the gate. Law enforcement has been notified and will meet the aircraft shortly. Gas rippled through the cabin. Karen swayed on her heels, her eyes darting toward the cockpit, then toward the galley. This is ridiculous, she muttered. No. The silver-haired woman with the phone said, What's ridiculous is that you hit him and expected no one to care. Caleb sniffled softly, finally wiping his cheek with the back of his sleeve. His voice returned low and even. You didn't even ask my name. Karen froze. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It carried weight, shame, recognition. You didn't even ask, Caleb repeated. Quieter now. He turned back to the window. Outside, the jet bridge was already being rolled back toward the plane. A uniformed airport officer stepped into view, standing beside the gate agent, radio in hand, looking up toward the fuselage. The story hadn't even started yet, but everyone on that plane already knew. This flight wasn't going anywhere. 1 hour earlier, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport bustled with the familiar noise of rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and the hum of impatient travelers. In the boarding area for Vera Jet Flight 61 to Los Angeles, a small figure stood near the gate, red backpack clipped snugly over both shoulders, hands tucked politely behind his back. Caleb Whitman, 10 years old, stood in line alone, his eyes darting between the automated screen above the gate and the agents busy scanning boarding passes. He was dressed simply, gray knit sweater, tan khaki pants, clean sneakers, no flashy labels, no bodyguard, just a printed boarding pass in hand and a folded letter in his back pocket, the one his mother had given him before dropping him off at the private security lounge. She'd kissed his forehead and said, Don't worry, everything's been arranged. All you have to do is sit back and look out the window. He remembered nodding, swallowing the little pit of nervousness in his chest. But now, as the business travelers and polished influencers crowded the first-class line, Caleb's presence drew subtle glances. Not overt, not loud, but undeniable. When the gate agent called for Group 1, Caleb stepped forward quietly, boarding pass in hand. The woman at the podium looked down at him, her smile slightly forced. Hi there, sweetie. Are you lost? Caleb shook his head, lifting his pass. I'm flying alone. My mom booked the ticket. I'm in seat 2A. The agent hesitated, took the pass, scanned it. A green light beeped. Oh, she said. Okay, then just make your way down the jet bridge. Follow the signs. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. As Caleb turned, a tall man 2 places behind him narrowed his gaze. He'd been observing quietly from the moment the boy stepped up. Late 50s, gray at the temples, tailored navy coat, and an expensive briefcase slung over his shoulder. His name tag read Graham R. Dalton, though no one seemed to notice. Graham didn't speak, just watched as Caleb walked down the jet bridge with the careful steps of a child, determined not to seem out of place. Inside the aircraft, the cabin smelled faintly of leather and lavender cleaner. The lights were soft, calming. Caleb stepped into the first-class section, where a flight attendant with a warm smile greeted him. Welcome aboard, she said gently. Caleb returned the smile, nodded. Thank you. His seat 2A was a window seat with wide cushions and a folded blanket on the armrest. He placed his backpack carefully beneath the seat, took off his sweater, and folded it neatly on his lap. His movements were precise, practiced, like someone who'd been taught to do things just so. No one was seated in 2B yet, and the rows behind him were still empty. He took the moment to look out the window, watching as ground crew moved with measured urgency beneath the wing. Bright orange batons, conveyor belts, loading bags, a luggage cart zipped past. He felt calm, not excited, not scared, just quietly prepared. From the galley, another flight attendant appeared. Karen Ulton, still fresh-faced before the long flight, her uniform crisp and posture immaculate. She glanced toward the front of the cabin, her eyes falling on Caleb. Her expression tightened. She didn't approach him, just turned away with a shallow breath. Behind her, Graham Dalton stepped on board. As the attendant greeted him, Graham scanned the cabin and noted Caleb's presence in 2A. His gaze lingered a second longer than normal. "Morning," Graham murmured, handing over his pass. "Welcome, Mr. Dalton," the attendant said cheerfully. "Sat 3A, just here on the left." He nodded, walked past Caleb without a word, but sat diagonally behind him, well, within earshot. As more passengers boarded, Caleb sat silently, watching the clouds shift outside. He kept his posture straight, knees together, fingers gently tapping the armrest in rhythm with the pulse of the engines outside. The hum soothed him. A couple across the aisle settled into 2C and 2D, chatting about real estate and Napa wine tours. The woman glanced at Caleb and whispered something to her husband, who nodded but said nothing. The cabin filled slowly. Businessmen, a young tech executive wearing AirPods, a retired professor with a tote bag full of crossword puzzles but no other children. Caleb remained the anomaly. From behind his newspaper, Graham occasionally peeked over the fold, observing the boy's quiet demeanor. No fidgeting, no whining, just stillness. A flight attendant offered Caleb juice. He declined politely, said he was fine. At that moment, Karen Ulton returned to the cabin, doing her final head count. Her gaze swept across the rows. When it landed on Caleb, she frowned faintly. She approached him. "Sweetheart," she said, voice artificially sweet. "Are you sure you're in the right section? This is first class." Caleb looked up, unsure what to say. "Yes, ma'am, Cat 2A, my boarding pass," said. Karen interrupted. "I'll double check. Sometimes children are assigned here by mistake. Just stay seated for now." Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either. Just enough of a chill to cause Caleb's shoulders to inch inward. From 3A, Graham lowered his paper slightly, watching, listening. Karen disappeared toward the front of the plane. Caleb's eyes returned to the window. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass for a second before fading. The red backpack sat quietly beneath his seat, zipped tightly. Inside, tucked between snacks and coloring books, lay a sleek device connected to encrypted GPS, something his mother insisted he carry. In case, she'd said, "Not that you'll need it, but it's better to be safe." A notification silently blinked green on his watch. Location verified, boarding complete. Caleb didn't smile, but something in his posture relaxed. Seat 2A belonged to him. No matter what they thought, the final boarding call had passed. The cabin doors sealed with a soft hiss, and the overhead lights dimmed to a soft glow. First class settled into the stillness before takeoff. That short, peaceful moment when passengers adjusted their seatbelts, flipped open magazines, or powered down devices. Caleb remained in seat 2A, hands folded neatly over his gray sweater. He glanced toward the window once more, not nervous, just waiting. Then he heard her footsteps. Click, click, click. Karen Ulton emerged from the galley with a clipboard in hand and a storm cloud over her expression. She made her way up the aisle, her gaze fixed on 2A like a laser sight. Caleb noticed. His posture straightened. He tucked his elbows closer. She stopped beside him, towering over his small frame. "Young man," she said, voice too crisp to be kind, "I checked the manifest again. This seat isn't registered to any unaccompanied minor." Caleb looked up, blinking slowly. "But I have a boarding pass," he replied softly. "It's scanned green," the gate agent said. Karen held up a hand. "I don't need a lecture. Where are your parents?" "I'm flying alone, ma'am. My mom. She arranged everything. There's a letter in my bag." Her frown deepened. "A letter?" Caleb nodded, leaned down, unzipped the side pouch of his backpack, and carefully pulled out a neatly folded page. It had the Whitman Foundation letterhead, embossed seal, and a handwritten signature at the bottom. Karen took it without thanks. She scanned it for all of 2 seconds, then scoffed. This proves nothing. Anyone can print a letter. But that's my mom's. I said enough, she snapped. Then in one shocking motion, she ripped the paper in half. The sound tore through the quiet cabin louder than the engines outside. Caleb's breath hitched. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He just stared at the shredded halves now crumpled in her hand. You'll need to move to the back, Karen said. We'll find you a more appropriate seat. From behind her, someone stirred. A man in his late 40s, the one who had noticed Caleb earlier, seated in 2C, pulled out one of his earbuds. Excuse me, he said. He's had that seat since boarding. The attendant scanned his pass. Karen turned toward him, irritated. Sir, this doesn't concern you. The man raised an eyebrow. Actually, it does. He's a child alone, and you just tore up his documentation. I'm following protocol, Karen retorted. Security will review it if needed. Then maybe security should be called, he muttered. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're not involved in this. Please sit back and let the crew handle it. Caleb remained still, eyes flicking between the two adults. The heat of embarrassment crept up his neck. But he didn't speak. Behind them, more heads turned. Murmurs started. Why is she targeting the kid? He didn't even raise his voice. Did she just tear his letter? Karen's jaw clenched. She looked back at Caleb and barked. Stand up now. Caleb obeyed slowly, silently. He slid out of his seat and stood beside it, fingers curling at his sides. He stared at the floor. His backpack sat awkwardly between his feet. Karen gestured toward the rear of the cabin. You can stand here until I get a crew member to relocate you. Graham Dalton, still seated in 3A, watched carefully over the rim of his glasses. He said nothing yet, but his eyes, sharp and seasoned, followed every motion with growing interest. Caleb stood in place, unmoving, unspoken, still holding the broken pieces of his mother's letter, now limp in his hand. From the rear of first class, the silver-haired woman, the same who had filmed boarding earlier, reached for her phone again. She began recording quietly, angled toward Caleb and Karen. You didn't even ask him his name, she said under her breath, mostly to herself, but loud enough to be heard in the rows nearby. A young woman in 1D whispered to her husband, This feels wrong. Karen, pretending not to hear, walked briskly toward the cockpit. Caleb remained frozen. He didn't cry, but the tears sat right behind his eyes, waiting. The kind of tears that weren't from fear, but from frustration, from being treated like a stranger in a place where he had every right to belong. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. The tension wasn't a whisper anymore. It was real, present, crawling up the walls of the cabin. Where's the supervisor? Someone asked. I think that lady's overstepping. Caleb took a small step back. The space around him felt larger than it should, colder, like he wasn't part of it anymore. From his seat, Graham Dalton leaned slightly forward, his voice calm and low, directed just enough to reach Caleb. You all right, son? Caleb nodded without looking back. Just a small motion. Karen returned this time with the flight manifest in hand, and a younger male attendant trailing behind her. Nervous, eyes darting. Confirmed, she said curtly. No minor by the name Caleb Whitman listed. The male attendant glanced down at Caleb, then at the torn letter in Karen's hand, then at the rising unease in the cabin. Karen continued, You'll be moved once we've cleared taxi. Remain standing. That was the final blow. Caleb didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just stood, eyes low, fists clenched around the scraps of the letter. Every ounce of his small body radiated restraint and silent hurt. From behind him, phones were recording now, one by one, quietly, deliberately. No one shouted, but no one looked away. The story was already writing itself. And the kid in 2A, the kid who hadn't spoken above a whisper, was at the center of it all. The silence in the cabin was no longer passive. It had shape, weight, and direction. Like all the air had shifted toward one small figure standing near C2A. Caleb Whitman, 10 years old, still wordless. With his mother's torn letter clutched in one hand and eyes fixed on the floor, not a single sound escaped him. But every passenger could feel it. The storm hadn't passed. It was building. In the galley behind the first-class curtain, 26-year-old flight attendant Jaime Tran fumbled nervously through the printed manifest. Her hands trembled just enough to cause a faint rustle with every page she flipped. She hadn't said a word during the altercation. Karen made that impossible. But Jaime had watched, and what she'd seen didn't sit right. She found it. Line 17. Whitman Caleb E., Seat 2A, flagged Do Not Disturb Special Services Level Alpha Contact, Whitman Foundation Internal Security, Washington, D.C. Jaime's stomach dropped. Alpha flag. In her 6 months working at Vergé, she had never seen that classification on a domestic flight. International, maybe. Government escort, possibly. But a child. She stepped toward the interphone on the bulkhead and keyed in the code to reach the airline's operations desk. But before she could press the final button, Karen's voice slashed through the air behind her. Jamie. Jaime froze. Karen walked in, arms folded, manifest in hand, radiating authority. Step away from the phone. I need to confirm something on the manifest, Jaime said cautiously. Karen's eyes narrowed. You don't. I've already reviewed everything. The boy's not authorized to sit in 2A. Period. Jaime hesitated. But his name's on the list. It says he's... I said drop it, Karen snapped, stepping forward. Jaime instinctively stepped back. It's a level alpha flag, Karen. I've never even seen Karen leaned in, voice dangerously low. Do you want to finish this flight, employed, or should I call the captain right now and tell him you're insubordinate? Jaime's mouth opened, then shut again. Her hand slowly dropped from the phone. Karen smiled, tight victory in her jaw. Good. Now go prep beverage service. I'll deal with the boy. Jaime didn't move immediately. Her mind raced, alarm bells ringing loud. Level Alpha Whitman. She'd heard the name before on the news and finance reports. Nina Whitman, philanthropist, tech financier, rumored to have influence that reached into every sector from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill. And her son was on this flight, standing in front of a seat he rightfully owned, being treated like a stowaway. Jaime stepped into the galley's side corridor and pulled out her personal phone. She didn't dare text. Not yet. But she tapped her notes app, typed a short entry. Flight 6117, passenger Caleb Whitman, seat 2A, alpha flag escalation, blocked by senior attendant. She saved it, then slipped the phone away. Back in the cabin, Caleb had returned to silence. He stood like a statue, eyes still slightly misty, but his jaw now tight. His heart pounded, not from fear but from restraint. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. At home, everything worked. People listened. The system responded. Here it had failed him. He glanced to his left. Karen had retreated temporarily to the galley. Other passengers were still whispering, watching. Caleb sat down slowly, not back in his seat, but on the floor near it, legs crossed, hands in his lap. He didn't ask for help, didn't make a scene. He just existed quietly in a space where he wasn't wanted. Then he did something no one noticed. He tapped his watch, not once, but 3 short taps, then 2 long ones, then 1 more short. 321. It was a silent panic code embedded in the watch's firmware by his mother's security advisor. A direct signal sent to a private network monitored by Whitman Foundation's crisis operations team. To anyone watching, it looked like he was just fidgeting. But miles away in a secure data center beneath downtown D.C., an encrypted console blinked to life. Alert code 321, minor emergency. Asset Caleb E. Whitman. A screen flashed. An operator reached for her headset. Back on the plane, Graham Dalton, still seated in 3A, closed his newspaper entirely. Now he'd seen the taps. Subtle, intentional. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and tapped his phone once under the seat table, activating a silent recording app. He wasn't just any businessman. He hadn't just happened to be seated behind Caleb. Graham was a legal strategist for Whitman Foundation's crisis division, and the plan had always been, observe, only intervene if he signals. Caleb had just signaled. Meanwhile, high above them, embedded within the plane's internal Wi-Fi relay system, a discrete company-installed camera inside the forward bulkhead blinked red once. Activated remotely by the code, it began recording, not for passenger security, but for internal documentation. Only 3 people on the planet knew that camera existed. Nina Whitman was one of them. Back in the galley, Karen composed herself in the mirror. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her collar, then stepped back into the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, walking up the aisle, "we'll be departing shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten seatbelts." Her eyes landed on Caleb, still sitting on the floor, still silent. She marched toward him. "Get up! You don't sit on the floor in first class." He looked up, eyes clearer now. His voice returned, even and controlled. "I'm not moving until someone calls my mom." Karen laughed, a sharp scoff. "You're not calling anyone." But her words were already obsolete. A new alert pinged in the cockpit. The captain's console glowed. "Security escalation. Priority hold. Do not proceed to runway. Await further instruction." The plane, which had begun to slowly taxi, stopped again. Every passenger felt it. The delay, the tension. Karen turned toward the front, confused. Caleb didn't smile. But in his silence, something shifted. Power had entered the cabin. It just wasn't wearing a uniform. The plane remained idle, unmoving on the tarmac. A low hum filled the cabin, the ambient noise of uncertainty. No one spoke above a whisper. Passengers fidgeted with tray tables, scrolled through idle screens, but their attention kept drifting back to the small boy seated on the floor near 2A. Caleb hadn't moved, still cross-legged, still quiet, but the calm in his body had begun to harden. The softness in his eyes, the gentle slump of his shoulders, it was shifting. Not toward anger, not yet, but toward something deeper, a quiet, growing resistance. Karen Elton stepped out from the galley once more, her lips pinched into a line. Her walk was sharper this time, heels hitting the carpet with clipped defiance. She glanced at the cockpit, still no clearance for takeoff. Then her eyes narrowed on Caleb, who hadn't budged. She walked past him without a word, pretending he didn't exist. Instead, she approached a young couple in 2C and 2D, offering them water and a warm smile. "Would you like sparkling or still?" she asked sweetly. They both declined politely, casting wary glances toward the front. As she turned to head back, Caleb raised his hand. "Not high, just a small, polite gesture." Karen's smile vanished. "What now?" she said, stopping just short of him. Caleb looked up, eyes steady. "Could I have some water, please?" Her jaw twitched. "You don't make requests from the floor." "I'm thirsty," he said quietly. "That's all. You can wait until beverage service begins," Karen snapped, "unless you plan on actually taking your seat like a civilized passenger." From across the aisle, a soft voice spoke up. "I think the boy deserves a drink." Karen turned. A man easily in his 70s, white hair thinning, came tucked beside him, was rising slowly from seat 2F. He leaned heavily on the armrest, but stood tall once upright. Karen blinked. "Sir, please sit down." "He's a child," the man said, voice calm but resolute, "and you've treated him like a problem since he stepped on board." "This is a security matter," Karen said louder now, "and I will not allow interference from other passengers." "Then call security," the man replied, "because I won't sit quietly while you humiliate a boy in front of strangers." Karen's voice sharpened to a blade. "If you don't return to your seat immediately, I will have you removed from this flight." The old man didn't back down, but a younger attendant, Jaime, hurried forward and gently placed a hand on his arm. "Please, sir," she whispered, "just for now." He looked at Caleb, nodded once, then slowly sank back into his seat, breathing heavily. Karen turned back to Caleb. "You see what you're doing?" she hissed. "You're creating a disturbance. You're turning passengers against this crew." Caleb didn't flinch. "I didn't do anything. You refused to cooperate. You questioned my authority. You sat on the floor like some protester. I just wanted water." He interrupted. That simple phrase rang out louder than it should have. The cabin fell into a tense hush. Karen's eyes lit with something dangerous. "You think you're special?" she spat. "That the rules don't apply to you?" "No," Caleb said. "I think my mom would be disappointed to hear how you've treated me." That was it. The moment snapped. In one swift, uncontrolled motion, Karen raised her hand and struck Caleb across the other cheek. The sound cracked through the first class, audible, final, the kind of sound that kills conversation. Gasps erupted. A woman in 1C covered her mouth. The man in 3B stood halfway, frozen in disbelief. Caleb didn't fall, didn't stumble. His head snapped to the side from the force, but he stayed upright. His hands clenched, his breath hitched, but no tears came. Karen's own chest heaved as she stared at him, hands still hovering. Her face was a mixture of rage and something else, shock as if she couldn't believe she'd done it again. Did she just hit him again? Someone whispered. She hit a child. Oh my God. Across the cabin, phones rose into the air like drawn swords. This time, no one was subtle. Every angle, every seat, every witness. Karen stepped back a half step, suddenly aware of the glow of red recording lights. Caleb slowly turned his head forward again. His cheek flushed a deep crimson, but his eyes, those soft, hesitant eyes, had changed. Now they were sharp, clear, steeled. He looked up, not at Karen, but straight ahead. Through her. You hit me, he said softly. Again. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her fingers twitched. Her posture wavered. From behind them, Graham Dalton stood. Captain needs to be alerted, he said calmly to Jaime. Now. Jaime didn't ask why. She rushed to the intercom. The cabin was alive now. Not with noise, but with electricity. Every passenger knew this flight had crossed a line that wouldn't be erased. A voice crackled from the cockpit. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Due to an onboard incident, we have been instructed to remain grounded. Airport authorities are en route. Please remain in your seats. Karen's shoulders slumped slightly. She turned as if trying to retreat into the galley, but Caleb spoke again. You didn't even want to know who I was. She stopped. You just decided, he said louder now, that I didn't belong, that I was a problem. Kid, Karen began weakly. I'm 10, Caleb said. Not stupid. And that was when the passengers applauded. Not loudly, just a soft collective clap like the flutter of wings. Karen froze. Caleb sat back down in seat 2A slowly, purposefully. The boy they thought was invisible was now undeniable. Silence swept across the cabin like a blanket of static. Not the kind that settled nerves, but the kind that thickened the air, made every rustle of a jacket, every click of a seatbelt sound amplified, intrusive. Karen had vanished into the galley, her footsteps fast, almost panicked. Jaime stood stiff near the intercom, unsure if she should sit or speak. The other attendants had gone quiet. Passengers sat in stunned rows, some whispering, others locked in disbelief. Everyone had seen it. The slap, the second one, and the child who hadn't flinched. Caleb Whitman sat in seat 2A. Finally, his posture upright, eyes closed now, not in rest, but in resistance, as if shutting the world out was the only way to stay whole. A ping echoed through the cockpit. The co-pilot looked up. Captain, Ops Control just flagged us. The captain read the blinking notification aloud. Level 2 internal incident. Cabin personnel under review. Hold position. He frowned. They're escalating. The co-pilot nodded. Looks like ground is rerouting law enforcement to our gate. They want the aircraft immobilized. The captain reached for the intercom. His voice, calm but clipped, filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an internal situation on board, we are being held at the gate by request of airport operations and security personnel. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your cooperation. Back in first class, the announcement washed over the passengers like a cold wave. Internal situation. They're locking us down. This is bad. In 2A, Caleb's breathing remained steady, his eyes still closed, hands resting palm down on the armrests. The red marks on both cheeks had begun to fade into blotchy pink, but they were unmistakable. His lips didn't move. Not a flinch, not a word. The whispering started again. First row by row, then pocket by pocket. The kind of murmurs that carried that said, something serious is going on. That questioned, who is this boy? In the row behind Caleb, Graham Dalton calmly set down his folded newspaper. No more pretense. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, withdrew a phone, not the kind with apps and games, but a secure device with no logo. Matte black finish, encrypted keypad. He unlocked it with a thumbprint, then with deliberate calm, he dialed a number. 3 rings, then a voice. Whitman Security. This is Dalton, he said. Confirming escalation. Passenger Alpha 1 initiated panic code. Flight 617 is grounded. Immediate asset extraction required. There was a pause. Understood, Mr. Dalton. Response is active. Estimated contact 8 minutes. He ended the call without another word. No one noticed. Not Jamie, who stood beside the jump seat, anxiously twisting a ring on her finger. Not Karen, now pacing in the galley, breathing heavy into her palm. And not even the couple across the aisle who had begun airdropping the video to their own phones and others around them. The video had gone viral inside the plane before it ever left the ground. One woman whispered, "Send it to everyone nearby." Another replied, "Already did. Half the cabin's got it." In row 4, a teenage boy, hoodie up, headphones around his neck, uploaded the video to TikTok with a caption that read, "Flight attendant slaps kid in first class." Then this happened. In less than 2 minutes, it had over 1,200 views. Within 5, it would cross 10,000. But Caleb still hadn't moved. Not because he was frozen, but because he was thinking. He was remembering what his mom had told him. Silence is sometimes the loudest message. She'd also said, "If you're ever afraid, don't shout. Signal. We'll always be watching." He didn't feel afraid now. Not exactly. Just heavy. Weighted with something he didn't have a name for. He opened his eyes. Karen reappeared in the aisle, trying to regain composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We've had a miscommunication involving a seating issue that is now being handled," someone scoffed loudly. "Handled?" A woman near the bulkhead snapped. "You assaulted a child." Karen stiffened. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." "I'm serious," she said, "and I have it on video." Karen looked around. 4 phones were raised in plain sight, all recording her now. She took a step back, retreating behind the curtain again. At that exact moment, the cabin lights flickered. Not off, not alarming, but just enough to trigger awareness. From the far rear of the plane, a ground crew member boarded through the service door, whispering something into Jaime's ear. Her face went pale. Then she nodded, turned toward the cabin, and walked up to the front. She stopped in front of Caleb, knelt down gently. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice different now, softer, a little tremble in it. "Is your name Caleb Whitman?" He nodded slowly. "I need to ask you something very important, okay?" Her voice lowered. "Did you activate your emergency alert?" He didn't answer with words. He lifted his left wrist slightly. The watch blinked once. "Green." Jaime swallowed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. From behind her, Graham Dalton stood. "Jamie," he said calmly, "the response team will be here shortly. No one speaks to him unless it goes through me." Karen heard it from the galley. She stepped into view. "Who are you to give orders to my staff?" Graham didn't raise his voice. "Graham Dalton, Special Counsel, Whitman Foundation Crisis Division." Karen paused. "That's not possible." "I suggest," he interrupted, "you prepare a formal statement. Legal and law enforcement will board in under 5 minutes." The passengers gasped again, this time not in shock, but in realization. The truth was unraveling, and Caleb, he didn't need to say a word. The system was already speaking for him. The cabin door hissed open with a metallic sigh, and all eyes turned toward the front. 2 uniformed officers stepped onto the aircraft. One male, tall and broad-shouldered, with calm eyes beneath a navy cap, and one female, smaller but no less authoritative, her bun perfectly tight and her presence sharper than steel. "Afternoon, folks," the male officer said, his voice carrying the kind of weight that silenced rooms. "I'm Officer Ramirez with Airport Police. This is Officer Daniels. We need everyone to remain in your seats. We're here to investigate a report of an in-flight altercation involving a minor." The silence that followed was different than the ones before. This one buzzed, heavy, charged. Karen Elton stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Her posture was rigid, but her voice laced with urgency. "Officers, thank goodness. Yes, there's been a disturbance caused by a child passenger. He's been verbally aggressive, refused to comply with crew instructions, and created a safety concern for my staff." The officers exchanged glances. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "A child?" "Yes." Karen nodded, gesturing to Caleb, still seated in 2A. That boy there? He refused to take his proper seat and became belligerent when asked to move. I was forced to restrain the situation. Daniels tilted her head slightly. By restrain, do you mean physically? Karen hesitated. I did what was necessary to maintain order. Whispers erupted like ripples across a pond. Daniel stepped forward. We'll need to speak to the passenger. Please stand back, ma'am. Karen looked as though she might argue, but thought better of it. She stepped aside stiffly. Ramirez crouched slightly in front of Caleb. His voice softened. Hey there. Can you tell me your name, son? Caleb looked up calmly. No fear, no trembling, just a steady gaze. Caleb Whitman, he said. Ramirez nodded. Were you involved in a disagreement with a member of the flight crew? I was told to leave my seat, Caleb said plainly. I explained I had a ticket. She tore my letter. I asked for water. She slapped me twice. Gas rang out again. More phones lifted into the air. Daniels turned to the crowd. Did anyone witness this? The response was overwhelming. Hands went up. Voices spoke at once. I have it on video. She hit him right in front of everyone. I saw the whole thing. Daniels raised a hand, one at a time. Please, if you have video, we'll need copies. A woman in row 1 held up her phone. I recorded both slaps. You can airdrop it now. Karen's face drained of color. She stepped forward. These passengers are overreacting. Ramirez held up a hand. Ma'am, we'll need you to step aside. This is now a formal investigation. She backed up slowly, breathing uneven. Graham Dalton stood, producing a small leather wallet from his inside jacket pocket. Officers, he said, tone calm but commanding. Graham Dalton, legal counsel for the Whitman Foundation. Daniels blinked. You're with the foundation? Yes. I've been traveling as assigned security counsel for Caleb. He activated an emergency alert. I suggest you escalate this to the Port Authority and request direct liaison with our legal team in Washington. Ramirez's demeanor changed subtly. Respect crept into his tone. Understood. Daniels looked at Caleb. Are you hurt? Caleb shook his head. Not really, but my mom's going to be mad. Chuckles fluttered awkwardly around the cabin. Do you want medical attention? She asked. I'm okay, he replied, but he paused, looking between the officers, then toward Karen. I think you should call my mom or her lawyer. Either one's fine. The words landed like a hammer. Not shouted, not dramatic, just inevitable. Karen stepped forward again, desperation creeping into her voice. You're making a mistake. I didn't know who he was. He wasn't acting like a normal first-class passenger. Define normal, someone muttered from the back. Officer Ramirez didn't flinch. Ma'am, please remain silent until we finish our interviews. Passengers whispered again. One man whispered to his wife, This just went federal. A teenage girl pulled up Google, typing Caleb Whitman into her phone. Her eyes widened as the search results loaded. Oh my God, she breathed. His mom's Nina Whitman. That Nina Whitman. Others began to murmur louder now, the realization spreading like wildfire. She owns that think tank in D.C., right? She funds half the clean water projects in Africa. She's richer than Elon, right? Karen stood frozen in the aisle. Ramirez stepped toward the cockpit and spoke to the captain. Moments later, the intercom chimed again. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be returning to the yacht. Law enforcement will continue their investigation off the aircraft. Please remain seated. Daniels turned back toward Caleb. Would you like to step off first or stay seated for now? Caleb looked around at the passengers, at Yaimi, who stood quietly to one side, watching with a mix of guilt and awe, at Graham, who gave him a small, affirming nod. Then he stood up. Not slowly, not defiantly, just with purpose. I'll walk. Ramirez motioned to the front. You're clear. As Caleb passed by Karen, he didn't say a word. He didn't look at her, but she looked at him. And what she saw wasn't a boy with a backpack. It was a boy with the full weight of a name that mattered more than any uniform. And the part she couldn't undo, she had slapped that name twice. Outside the aircraft, a light breeze stirred the Texas heat. But inside the terminal, where security personnel led Caleb and Graham, the atmosphere was heavy with something else. Reverence, shock, a dawning realization no one had seen coming. Two additional airport police officers met them at the jet bridge, both younger than Ramirez and Daniels, but clearly briefed. They flanked Caleb, not like guards escorting a threat, but like aides surrounding someone important. Graham gave a quiet nod, straight to the incident room. Back on board, passengers sat in stunned silence, all eyes shifting to the front of the plane where Karen still stood, pale and rigid. Officer Ramirez remained by the galley, now speaking into a radio clipped to his shoulder. In the second row, the woman who had filmed the slaps scrolled through her phone, then gasped audibly, "It's her! It's really her!" A man across the aisle leaned over. "Who?" The woman turned her phone so he could see the screen. A headline stared back. Nana Whitman, billionaire philanthropist and founder of Whitman Global Foundation. And just beneath it, a photograph. Na, standing on a podium at a UN conference, smiling, hand resting gently on the shoulder of a young boy in a dark suit. Same almond brown eyes, same posture. It was Caleb. "Holy hell," the man whispered. "That's his mom." At the back of the cabin, the teenage girl who had Googled the name earlier sat with her mouth slightly open, holding her phone up for the man beside her. Look at the articles. This lady funds the Whitman Scholar Medical Program, owns clean energy startups, advises the State Department, and she's raising her son like a normal kid." "Not so normal anymore," the man muttered. In the galley, Jaime, still frozen from the events of the past hour, finally breathed out. The information settled like a weight in her chest. Caleb Whitman, Nina Whitman's son. He had been sitting right there in seat 2A. She felt the world tilt a little. Karen, meanwhile, had taken a half step back against the wall. Her voice barely broke above a whisper. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who he was." Ramirez turned to face her, his eyes cool and unreadable. "You mean you didn't know who his mother was?" Karen swallowed hard. "I thought he didn't act like he was just a kid sitting alone." "Exactly," Ramirez said. "A kid sitting alone." The implication hung there, sharp as glass. Karen's face turned a deeper shade of white. Ramirez continued. "We'll need you to stay seated until airport legal arrives." Karen blinked, her mouth parting as if to object, but no sound came out. On the tarmac, a black SUV had pulled up to the base of the jet bridge. Inside the security lounge, Caleb sat calmly on a leather chair, feet not quite touching the floor. His backpack rested on the ground beside him. Across from him, a female officer reviewed a tablet. "Mr. Whitman," she said softly, "we've confirmed your identity. Your emergency alert triggered a direct notification to DHS, which escalated to FAA in the Foundation's internal protocol." Graham nodded beside Caleb. "Protocol Alpha executed correctly. His wristwatch is hard-coded to send out a Level 2 silent alert, GPS ping, and trigger footage from the aircraft's internal cameras." "Jesus," the officer muttered under her breath. "You packed all that into a kid's watch?" "It's not paranoia if you're right," Graham said. The officer exhaled. "We've also received confirmation from Mrs. Whitman's legal team. A representative will be here within the hour." Caleb looked up. "Can I call my mom now?" The officer smiled. "Absolutely." Graham handed Caleb a different phone, secure, encrypted, just like the one used earlier. He dialed. One ring, two, then a voice answered. "Caleb." "Hi, Mom," he said, his tone gentle, steady. There was a pause. Then Na Whitman's voice came through like velvet and steel. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Did anyone hurt you?" "A flight attendant twice." Another pause. The temperature in Na's voice dropped a few degrees. "What's the officer's name?" "Karen Elton." More silence. Graham leaned forward, whispering. "She already knows." "She's triangulating personnel records as we speak," Na's voice returned. "You did exactly what you were taught, Caleb. I'm proud of you." "Are you hurt?" "No, just embarrassed." "You have nothing to be embarrassed about." There was a silence, the kind that passes between two people who understand each other completely. "Someone from the Foundation's legal team is on the way," she added. "You'll ride back with them. I'll be landing in 3 hours. We'll talk then." "Okay. I love you." "I love you too, Mom." The call ended. Graham placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did well. Meanwhile, outside the terminal, journalists were beginning to gather. Phones vibrated with notifications. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. Each platform pulsing with the same story. Flight attendant slaps Caleb Whitman. Plane grounded. Investigation underway. Inside the plane, a new kind of silence had taken hold. Respect, shame, awe. Jaime turned to the older woman beside her and whispered. She treated him like he was nothing. The woman nodded, and he still didn't shout, didn't raise his voice, just asked for water. Karen remained in the galley staring at the floor. She no longer looked like authority. She looked like regret. And far down the corridor where Caleb was now being escorted toward the black SUV, a small group of passengers watched from the terminal window. Someone murmured, "He'll never be just a kid again." The interview room was cold, not just by temperature, but by design. Neutral paint, bland lighting, a rectangular table with metal chairs on either side. Karen Olton sat stiffly, hands folded tightly in her lap, every breath controlled, every movement tense like a stretched wire about to snap. Across from her, two airline compliance officers and a legal counsel took notes quietly. An internal affairs representative from the airline's Human Resources Division tapped his pen against a folder labeled Flight 107 Incident Cabin Crew Inquiry. "You understand, Miss Elton, this is a formal interview. Everything you say is being recorded and may be used in the final investigation summary," one of the officers said. Karen nodded faintly. Her once perfectly pinned bun now sagged slightly. Uniform wrinkled, mascara smudged. The image of composure had cracked. She licked her lips before speaking. "I followed standard protocol. The child was disruptive, defiant. I attempted to de-escalate." "According to how many passengers?" the HR rep asked flatly, flipping through printed witness statements. "Because we've received 9 video recordings, all showing you raising your voice, physically slapping the minor, and denying basic service like overhead space or water." Karen looked away. "I didn't know who he was." The legal counsel didn't even blink. "So if he were the son of a janitor instead of Nina Whitman, this would have been acceptable behavior." Her throat bobbed, but she didn't answer. The door opened. The airline's chief operating officer, a gray-haired man with a crimson tie and an expression like stone, stepped inside and handed the HR rep his phone. "Line 2, he said. "It's her." The room fell silent. Everyone knew who her meant. "Nah, Whitman." The HR rep stood up, excusing himself as he took the call in the hallway. The others remained seated. Karen's hands trembled now, not just from fear, but from the slow, irreversible understanding that her career, her life was changing irrevocably. Elsewhere in the airport, a different kind of interview was underway. Passengers from the flight were lined up, sitting individually with investigators, recounting their version of events. They didn't all know Caleb's full name at the time, but they all remembered the slaps. The elderly man, who had tried to intervene, gave his testimony in a calm, measured voice. The boy didn't raise his voice, not once. He just asked for water. That woman, she hit him because she could. The teenage girl with the TikTok handle at Sky Truce was already trending. Her video had passed 3 million views by the time she finished telling her side to an airport security officer. She just smacked him twice, and when people reacted, she tried to make him the villain. A middle-aged woman turned over her iPhone voluntarily. "I filmed everything. You can see the boy didn't provoke anything. Every testimony was consistent. Every voice carried the same underlying note. Outrage." Back in the executive lounge, Caleb sat quietly eating a sandwich handed to him by a nervous airport employee. Graham Dalton stood by the glass window, phone to his ear, murmuring something inaudible. Then a familiar voice entered the room. "I've confirmed with headquarters. Statement will be released in 20 minutes, said a calm man in a tailored gray suit. Jaime, the younger flight attendant, turned toward him. She'd seen him earlier on the flight. Just a quiet man in a window seat, flipping through the Atlantic and sipping ginger ale. But now with his badge displayed clearly on his chest and a tablet in hand, he didn't look like a passenger anymore. He looked like control. Who? Who are you, really? Jaime asked softly. The man turned, offering a calm smile. Michael Royce, Chief Legal Officer, Whitman Foundation. You were on the flight? He nodded. I travel on rotation whenever Caleb does, not to hover, just to be available. Jaime blinked, stunned. You were watching the whole time. Yes, Roy said simply, but sometimes the strongest protections aren't visible until they need to be. He glanced at Caleb, who gave a tiny wave. Jaime's breath caught in her throat. So, you knew what was happening and you let it unfold? No, he said gently. We let truth unfold. Caleb was taught to speak with respect and act with patience. He did both. And when that wasn't enough, the truth became undeniable through the eyes of strangers. Jaime sat down numb. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Caleb hadn't been alone. Not really. He had been watched, protected, documented. Ms. Whitman believes in accountability, Royce added, even when it's painful. Karen was still in the interview room when the HR rep returned, face pale. She accepted the apology, he announced, but she's not withdrawing the complaint. Civil charges are under review. Karen looked up. I didn't mean to hurt him. I know, the COO said, cutting her off. You meant to assert control. That's worse. He tapped the folder. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation. If legal action proceeds, your certification will be reviewed by the FAA and possibly revoked. Karen pressed her back into the chair, heart hammering. What do I do now? The room stayed silent. There were no more lifelines. Meanwhile, in a private lounge upstairs, Graham handed Caleb a new phone. You'll need this later, he said. A few calls are coming in. Media legal, but your mom said to wait until she arrives. Caleb nodded. Okay, also, Graham added, she wanted me to tell you she watched the video. Caleb looked up. All of it? All of it. What did she say? She said she's proud and that you remembered your training. Caleb smiled faintly. I almost cried, but I didn't. Graham ruffled his hair. Doesn't mean you're weak if you do, but I think you knew what mattered more. At that moment, Royce entered, holding up a tablet with a press release displayed. Here it comes. The headline read, Whitman Foundation confirms, son of Nina Whitman assaulted on domestic flight. Investigation underway. The caption beneath, we trust the justice system, but we also believe in the power of witnesses. Thank you to every passenger who stood up, spoke out, and told the truth. N.W. Caleb leaned back. He didn't need revenge. The world had already started turning. By the time the sun dipped behind the Dallas skyline, the world had already changed. In Manhattan, news tickers scrolled across massive digital billboards in Times Square. Whitman Air slapped on flight. Airline under fire. Cable anchors shuffled papers and blinked in disbelief as footage from multiple passengers flooded networks. On CNN, Anderson Cooper's voice echoed, We warn you, the video is disturbing. And it was. The sound, sharp and unmistakable, of Karen's hand colliding with Caleb's cheek reverberated through every home with a television. Then the second slap. Then the stillness, the hush of a cabin where justice had been broken. By 6:42 p.m., the hashtag #HatchJustice for Caleb had taken the #1 spot on Twitter worldwide. Threads exploded with commentary. He's 10. What kind of person hits a kid on a plane? Hatchet justice for Caleb. And he didn't even yell, didn't fight, just sat there. That's restraint. That's grace. Imagine if no one had filmed it. Imagine if he wasn't a Whitman. On Reddit, a full thread under RI Public Freakouts had nearly 50,000 upvotes. Titles ranged from Karen Meets Consequence to This Is Why We Film Everything. TikTok exploded even faster. The teenage girl from Seat 14IA had posted a 38-second clip with a voiceover. Her video began with Caleb's calm voice. I think my mom would be sad if she knew. Then smack, then stillness. The video ended with her whispering, His name is Caleb Whitman. It crossed 10 million views in 5 hours. Influencers stitched the video crying. Flight attendants posted videos saying, This isn't who we are, we stand with Caleb. Even celebrities joined in. An A-list actor posted, Just watched what happened to Caleb. Infuriating. Stay strong, kid. At the Whitman Foundation's media office, the team could barely keep up. Phones rang, emails stacked like bricks. Na Whitman herself, now en route via private jet, issued a written statement that went viral. As a mother, I am shaken. As a citizen, I am focused. As a leader, I trust the truth to stand. Thank you to everyone who recorded, who spoke, who cared. Underneath her signature, Nana Whitman, Justice for Caleb. Major media picked it up instantly. MSNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera. Even international channels translated the captions, showing a 10-year-old boy enduring the moment with a stoicism that shook the world. Back at the airport, the airline scrambled for damage control. Their first tweet, a cold corporate template, backfired immediately. We are aware of the incident aboard Flight 107 and are conducting a full review. We take all allegations seriously. The backlash was instant. You take it seriously now that he's a Whitman. Where were you when she slapped him the first time? Fire her publicly. Apologize fully. By 7:23 p.m., their Twitter replies were a war zone. Every post flooded with demands. Fire Karen, Jocker boycott Sky Airlines. Justice for Caleb under growing pressure. The airline's CEO made the call. Literally, he dialed Nina Whitman's private line. He said, breath shallow, I'm calling to express our deepest regret. Her voice cool and measured cut through. This is not a PR event for you, I understand, and I know you don't. My son was assaulted twice under your watch. Don't think a generic apology will protect your shareholders. There was silence on the other end. I'm issuing my own statement in the morning, Nina continued. You'll receive a formal legal notice before that. The world is watching. Let's not pretend it isn't. The line went dead. The CEO placed the phone on the table, pale as ash. His legal counsel stood nearby, staring at their own phone. Sir, you should see this. It was a post on LinkedIn from a verified account, a woman named Sophia Bennington, former Sky Airlines flight attendant. Her post read, I was part of Karen Elton's cabin crew for 3 years. I left after she struck an elderly man for not responding quickly enough during beverage service. I filed a report. Nothing happened. They said it was a misunderstanding. Now it's on camera. Now they'll listen. By midnight, Sophia's post had 400,000 likes and was trending under #Karen pattern and flight whistleblower. News shows lined up interviews. Lawyers took to YouTube breaking down liability. Airline stocks dipped 3.4% overnight. Advertisers called to pause partnerships. And still, Caleb hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. His silence, his restraint, had spoken louder than any press release. Back in the Whitman jet hangar, Caleb sat beside Graham and Royce as they watched clips roll in from around the world. Do I have to talk to reporters? Caleb asked softly. Royce smiled. Only if you want to. Caleb looked out the window. They're mad because I didn't do anything wrong. No, Graham said, kneeling beside him. They're mad because you did everything right and someone still hurt you. A beat passed. Is Karen going to jail? Royce hesitated. We don't know yet. That's up to the prosecutors. Caleb nodded slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just folded his hands in his lap and stared at the TV screen as the world lit up with his name. The morning light in Washington, D.C. felt sharper than usual. What should have been a routine day in a federal building was instead buzzing with urgency. Outside, protesters carried signs reading, Hat Justice for Caleb, and Reform Sky Airlines now. Reporters swarmed as airline executives arrived, their faces taut, forged into public scrutiny. Inside a packed hearing room of the House Transportation Committee, the CEO of Sky Airlines, Martin Hayes, straightened his tie, swallowed, and stepped to the podium. The room fell silent. Chairwoman Miller, Ranking Member Ortiz, and distinguished members of the committee. I stand before you, humbled and deeply troubled by the events aboard Flight 61C, he began, voice steady but somber. This was an unacceptable breach of trust, both with our passengers and with our own cabin crew. He proceeded to outline immediate changes, mandatory customer service retraining for all staff, emergency protocols for escalating passenger concerns, and installation of installed cameras, previously covert, being replaced with transparent public notice. As of today, he said, no cabin crew will be terminated without a full legal and ethical review. Any physical altercation with a passenger, regardless of position or age, will result in immediate suspension and pending investigation. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Cameras flashed. The hearing would be broadcast live in full. For millions watching, this was more than an apology. It was a reckoning. Back in Los Angeles, Nina Whitman sat in her private conference room, light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. A single statement signed in her name lay open on her laptop screen. To all leaders in commercial aviation, I urge you to sign the National Airline Ethics Charter, a binding agreement to uphold dignity, respect, and de-escalation over confrontation. I have faith in a better industry. Nina Whitman canvassers from 30 airlines had already responded. 12 had signed within hours: United, Delta, Frontier, Southwest. Each release noted they would adopt de-escalation training, expand child protection protocols, and mandate transparency to passengers about security cameras. Later that afternoon, during a closed meeting with Secretary of Transportation Lee, Nina's proposal was forwarded directly to the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) chief. There, in an emergency session, departmental leaders drafted what would soon be called the Child and Passenger Respect Mandate, a framework designed to embed respect into the core of flight personnel training and to penalize abuses of power swiftly. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Sky Airlines staff gathered for a mandatory all-hands meeting. The video from the hearing was played in full. Cabin crew watched in silence as the CEO pledged accountability. Some wept, others nodded, relieved to have a public stand behind them for once. Jaime Tran, the young flight attendant from Flight 6117, stood near the back clutching her pen. A colleague offered her a tissue, which she took gratefully. She watched the CEO's apology and the amendments to policy scroll at the bottom of her screen. A senior attendant from another crew leaned toward her. "This is what we've needed forever. Not just fixes, real change." Jaime nodded slowly. "It feels like redemption." In the Capitol hearing, lawmakers pressed further. Congresswoman Ortiz asked about enforcement. "Can we trust airlines to police themselves?" Hayes swallowed. "We will comply with FAA oversight, third-party audits annually, and a hotline for passengers and staff. Violations will be publicly reported." Senator Miller followed up. "And for unaccompanied minors, what about verification protocols, identification checks beyond boarding passes?" Hayes paused. "We are enhancing our minors protocol from pre-flight confirmation calls with guardians to onboard escort verification. Caleb will never be that vulnerable again." The crowd, committee members, media, public chairs erupted in cautious applause. Outside, the hashtag shifted. Hated airline ethics became the new trending topic as digital billboards in cities reflected the news. FAA to adopt National Passenger Respect Mandate. Nina Whitman pushes industry-wide ethics charter. In California, the editorial board of the LA Times opined, "When privilege meets prejudice, society either crumbles or rebuilds." Here we watch a broken system strengthened by integrity. Back at the Whitman Foundation, Graham Dalton reviewed the internal case log. "It's going to get messy," he said to Royce, "but we have everything in record." Royce nodded. "We're building a blueprint. This could be a template for all." Across the nation, corporate jet terminals and public airports both brace for ripple effects. Finally, under a shared sunset across America, Sky Airlines changed its Twitter banner to display a simple message next to its logo, "Committed to respect." And across the country, parents breathed easier because one boy's quiet courage had rewritten the rules of the sky. The early morning sun streamed through the glass panes of the private jet terminal, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Caleb Whitman emerged from the double doors of Sky Airlines Lounge, flanked by two discreet aides from Whitman Foundation and Officer Ramirez, paid leave evident in his calm posture. He carried no backpack, only a small duffel bag his mother had arranged for him. He didn't speak, didn't wave. He walked with quiet dignity, every step measured, eyes lifted, not toward the cluster of reporters behind the barrier, nor the glaring lights of camera crews, but up to the vast open sky above the airfield. He paused at the edge of the tarmac, sun warming his face. No clicking heels, no whispered conversation, just a small boy and an endless horizon. In that moment, his silence said more than any speech. Meanwhile, in a small one-room apartment in suburban Dallas, once bustling with pride and ease, tension hung thick like stagnant air. Karen Elton sat at her kitchen table, tea gone cold before her, mascara smudged, and her starched uniform replaced by a simple blouse. A termination letter lay open in front of her. Immediately effective review pending legal proceedings. Her phone pinged a news alert. Caleb Whitman publishes a handwritten letter. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. I am not angry, but I hope everyone learns to be better to people like me, even if they are not anybody's child. The words on the screen glowed. Compassion, grace, a forgiveness that cut deeper than any slap. Karen closed her eyes, pressing her temples. Guilt coiled in her chest. Regret dripped into tears unshed for hours. She stood and folded up the typed termination notice, placing it in an envelope along with the folder of notes from her interview and her insignia pin, her former badge of pride. For the first time in a long time, Karen was completely alone. At the Whitman hangar, Caleb boarded the private jet and took his seat. Graham sat nearby, phone in hand, replaying alerts that had come in overnight. Thousands of tweets, supportive letters, articles from 5 continents, and inquiries about Caleb's story being included in school ethics curriculums. Royce entered quietly, carrying a small envelope. From you? He asked Caleb. Caleb nodded. I wrote it before I flew in. Thought it should go to everyone. Royce examined the envelope's crisp white paper, embossed with Whitman Foundation seal. It's going straight to media. Caleb leaned against the seat. I don't need to speak on cameras. Graham offered him a small amused smile. You don't need to. You just need to be. As the jet taxied out, Caleb pushed his window shade up and watched the runways pass beneath him. The terminal shrank behind him. Reporters, signs, chaos, all fading. He gripped the armrest. Peace filled him. Tempered by fatigue, mother and son would reunite in New York. Back in Dallas, Karen stood by her front door, envelope in hand. She looked out across her quiet street, sunlight filtering through maple leaves. Her reflection in the window was unfamiliar to her. No uniform, no authority, just a woman forced to face herself. Inside, she sat at her dining table, the letter next to her. She stared at the words. I am not angry, but I hope everyone learns to be better to people like me, even if they are not anybody's child. She took a shaky breath, then wrote beneath, I am sorry, and simply signed Karen Elton. It was small, but it was honest. Thousands of miles away in New York, a newsstand headline caught the early afternoon sun. Boy writes letter sparks national apology. Caleb and Na exited the private jet. The press stood back on orders from security. Caleb held his mother's hand, the handwritten envelope tucked in his pocket. He stopped walking, turned his head side to side, letting the city sounds wash over him. The honk of yellow cabs, the hum of air conditioning units, the distant rumble of elevated trains. Na looked down. Speak when you're ready. Caleb glanced at her, then toward the skyline above. He nodded once softly. Moments later, scanners flashed and voices hummed. Historians would look back at this moment, not for the accolades, but for the trembling gentleness of a boy whose calm voice rewrote the rule. On evening news, Karen's apology letter was shown. A photo of her shaky handwriting spread across the segment. Experts debated the emotional weight of forgiveness. Hayden, an ethicist, commented, true accountability begins when there are no cameras. Meanwhile, Whitney Foundation sent Caleb's letter to news outlets. I am not angry, but I hope everyone learns to be better to people like me, even if they are not anybody's child. It became a rallying call printed in school newsletters, flipped into public forums, carved into social media profiles. At their Manhattan apartment that night, Caleb placed the letter on the mantel alongside a pressed dandelion Nana had found in Central Park. Na looked at the framed photo, mother and son on the jet, etched in pale dawn light. She hugged him tightly. You changed the world today. He didn't pull away. I just wanted to be fair. Na nodded. That's what matters. They stood quiet together in a city full of noise. Their silence spoke volumes. Outside, lights twinkled. Somewhere in Dallas, Karen placed her apology letter into a mailbox, sealed and final. Two ends of a story connected by a slap, separated by humility. One boy, calm and just, had closed a door on injustice, opened another on